Dark securitization. That's a fancy way of saying buying and selling little pieces of stuff secretly can be super scary. And the human reason behind that is that people will do anything for money. Okay, a brief history of securitization, stocks, bonds, etc. So lords in England, they like adventure, they like making money, they like cool textiles and owning fancy things from all over the world. So a couple of them get together and they say, let's send 3 ships to India to go get some cool loot. And so 3 go out and Edward Bonaventure comes back and the lords profit and it's totally awesome. So they do it again. But this time, no ships come back, and they lost their money. So that was kind of crappy. It turns out there's a solution to this problem, and the solution is you get more lords, 215 to be exact, and you buy a lot more ships. And in the finance world, we call this diversification, and that really means you get quantifiable risk and quantifiable returns. So as the number of ships go up, the variability of the loot you're going to get back becomes more and more stable, so that you can have an operation that makes sense. So I'll just let you think about that for half a second. So what the lords did is they securitized by creating a company. So they took all their money and they put it in a pile. They bought a bunch of ships. They incorporated. They made securities contracts for each lord saying how much of this corporation he owned. And then they kept a ledger of all of that business going on. Now this is really all securitization is. It's a fancy way of dividing a pile of assets or things that generate cash flow in time. So they created the Governor and Company of Merchants of London trading into the East Indies, or the Honorable East India Company, or John Company, the gangster name. And they went to the Queen and they said, Queen, we want to be the only guys that can go to India and get loot and bring it back. And she said, that's fine as long as you pay your taxes. Get the loot. Okay. So that was totally cool because at the time, going to India was like going to the moon. So they created a global logistics company that managed huge piles of risk and solved seemingly intractable operational problems. They were great at doing business. The not cool part was that the French Navy was disrupting their trade routes because they had more battleships and stuff. So the British lords were like, how do we solve this problem? Why don't we create a new company called the Bank of England? And the Bank of England will securitize British government debt, will buy that debt and get paid interest, and then the British government will create an awesome navy and go take out the French, and then our ships will be able to go to India. And then the British took over the world, so it was a pretty cool plan. And if you'll remember, the Hudson Bay Company was right here. Pretty cool company, just like the East India Company that started a nation. Okay, 1997. David Bowie is hanging out with Trent Reznor, and they're talking about how the internet's going to change music forever. And David Bowie realizes that his music probably isn't going to be worth as much in the future as it is today. So he decides that he's going to sell rights to his back catalog and all of the music he makes for the next 10 years, for a period of 10 years, in the form of bonds to Wall Street. So he goes to Wall Street, and he creates $55 million of 10-year bonds with a coupon rate of 7.9%. So that means he's paying back 8% every year. So it's pretty cool because the bonds went to the market. They were A-rated when they came out, and then as Napster and all the MP3 technology came out, the profitability of the music industry went down, and the bonds actually became junk. Bowie was good on the bonds. He paid them back, and he got the rights back to his catalog, but he would have never made that money in the 2000s. He made the money in the 90s like a smart dude. So the question is, why can't I do that? Because I know today I'm probably the best I'm ever going to be in the future. Why can't I sell little pieces of myself for lots of money and then make that work? Well, the answer is lawyers and accountants are super expensive. So if you're securitizing something less than $30 million, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I'm sorry, guys, for right now, you can't sell yourself. The future, which is right now, we're going to talk about a couple of things on the horizon that are going to make securitization a little different. One of those things is the API we've all been hearing about. Another one is asset-backed securities, which you may have heard about in 2008. And the third one is law tech / artificial intelligence, which is the rage right now. Okay, the API, cool. So it's a classic deal. For example, you're a driver at Uber. I give my time to Uber, and then Uber gives me money. And the twist is that it's all automated. There's no permanent workforce or offices. So neat. We can create a company with software, and it can be flexible and fluid and all that jazz. So labor for time in a unicorn billion-dollar company. Airbnb, same thing, except instead of your labor, it's a resource like your home. So you can rent out your house, and the API will administrate the buyers and the sellers and all those transactions. So everybody gets paid. Lending Club. This is just a twist on Uber, because what happens is you borrow money, and then you go to work to pay that money off, but you pay people on the other side, so they take the buy side of your loan. Okay, so new ways to create debt, new ways to work, new ways to rent resources to the world. Very exciting, huge valuations, cool. Asset-backed securities. Okay, so it turns out that you can take a pile of mortgages, you can put it in a pool that's like a company, and then you can sell little pieces of that pool as kind of like a stock or a bond. Now this right here is like, looks really boring, but it's actually a pile of variable rate mortgages that were issued in February 2015 around the height of the Canadian housing market. So we'll see how that goes. I will remind you guys that in 2008, the buying and selling of little pieces of stuff opaquely can be somewhat scary. So think hard about that. Okay, law tech and AI. Affordable automated securitization. So those accountants and lawyers that were really expensive in the 90s are now going to be algorithms that can do things automatically for you. Sorry, something am I? So you can create a security, you can create a stock, you can create a bond, you can create a ledger without having to go hire a lawyer or an accountant. So we've got API, we've got asset-backed securities, and we got law tech. What does that give us? It gives us the opportunity to create couch-backed securities. So for example, the nerds at Airbnb might realize that for every nice couch in an apartment, there's $10 of extra rental. So 10,000 couches times 30 days, that's 3 million of extra cash flow a month. That's a monetizable security. So what Airbnb might do is issue loans for couches to 10,000 people, and then go and resell those loans as couch-backed securities to people who want to put that in a pension fund or want to make a little money on the side. And so the collateral is the fact that you can keep renting your apartment. The risk capital is the money for the couch. Similarly, you might realize that, wow, law tech is so hot right now, I should get a degree in it. So you're working at TaskRabbit doing laundry and running errands, and TaskRabbit's like, we're going to lend you money to go to Udemy so you can get a law tech degree. So in the very similar way to the couch-backed security, you can get an education-backed security. So as Davyde Bowie has taught us, you can sell little pieces of everything. This is what we're approaching. You can securitize anything, small bits of anything, anywhere. Okay, so that seems pretty cool, right? Maybe. Blockchain. Okay, secret stuff, right? In the old days with lords, the lords, they would have these security contracts, they would have ledgers that told everybody who owned what and who owes what to whom. And because they were gentlemanly and they generally got along and they wanted to not get into tiffs at the country club, it usually worked out. But when it didn't work out and there was a dispute, they would go to the Royal British Court, and the rule of law enforced by the Queen would make sure that the contract was reconciled correctly. So because of this, your business had to take place in the light of day. If you wanted the contract to hold, you'd have to not do illegal things. So you couldn't make a business where you'd rob other lords, because that wouldn't be enforceable in court. So blockchain, as you know, allows secret transactions, anonymous transactions, secret ledgers, anonymous ledgers. There's a new platform out called Ethereum. It's effectively an API for encrypted ledgers and contracts that uses blockchain technology. So in the words of their own CTO, you can implement any web service without there being a legal entity behind it. So let's just think about that for a second. This is a contract enforcing platform that can enforce securities in secret and robotically. So I'm going to move slow now just while you think about it. There's a couple of academics who have done research on the kind of contracts you can create on this platform, Jules, Shi, and Cosba. So they did this contracts experiment. They didn't actually do these things, but they came up with sort of trace conditions to make sure you could actually do it. They proved that you could hack a website, you could create a contract that would hack a website for Bitcoin, assassinate someone for Bitcoin, or steal stuff for Bitcoin. So the happy language on Ethereum's page basically describes anonymous securitization. Using Ethereum, you can create a contract that will hold a contributor's money until a given date or goal is reached. Depending on the outcome, the funds will either be released to project owners or safely returned back to contributors/investors. All of this is possible without requiring a centralized arbitrator, clearinghouse, or having to trust anyone. So it means that you'd never have to see the lords of the country club, and you never have to go to the queen to resolve your problems under the rule of law, because this algorithm will do it for you. A developer at Ethereum, the more I make progress on the project, the more scared I get. Let's look at the kind of things that Secret Securitization Robot could help you with. Buying an apartment to go independent as a sex worker, insider stock market trading, starting an organ trade operation, funding a gang war, or undermining a politically unstable region because it benefits your business. So it's kind of scary. Secret contracts, secret companies that can do nefarious activities without anybody ever knowing, money coming from anywhere all over the world to do something totally gnarly that nobody will ever know about. And when we think about this, we think about the bad guys, the criminals, the thugs. They're going to use this technology to do bad stuff. But I think forgetting about the bad guys, there's something even more terrifying. And that is that you can create a completely autonomous company with this. Now, let's think about this for a second. You can create a company with no board, no CEO, no visible shareholders, no market reportings, no quarterly earnings, and this thing will go on without anybody at the head. As they say in their own language on the website, one of the many advantages of having a robot run your organization is that it is immune to any outside influence, as it is guaranteed to execute only what it was programmed to do. And because the Ethereum network is decentralized, you'll be able to provide services with 100% uptime guarantee. So this is a corporation that does whatever it wants and never dies. So the real question is, would you invest in an anonymous John company to pay off your mortgage in secret? If it was child trafficking on the other side of the planet, if it was messing with people that you don't really care about, would you invest in this platform if your neighbors didn't know about it?